So we will continue on to our final TED-style presentation, and it will be done by Dr. Ryan Punambolam from Doctors Hospital. Dr. Ryan is a neurologist and neurophysiologist and has focused on promoting stroke care in the Cayman Islands, emphasizing comprehensive patient-centered care. He's also dedicated to teaching, holding adjunct professorships, and earning numerous teaching awards. His outlook is centered on preventative neurology, so follows on nicely from the last conversation. He aims to reduce the incidence of stroke and other neurological disorders through lifestyle changes and risk management. His commitment to excellent patient care and education makes him pivotal in advancing neurological health in the Cayman Islands. The title of his presentation is Optimizing Brain Health for Cayman's Future. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Punambolam to the stage.
So, you guys are doing okay? You must be wondering, what am I doing up here? And that's a good question. I promise you, give me 10 minutes of your time and listen to my story, and you guys will see how our two disciplines, neurology and economics, are in fact inextricably bound. So my colleagues know this. I grew up in a smallish town in Canada called Waterloo, Ontario. It's that smaller section there. And when I was growing up, it's a lot bigger now, but it was about 50,000 people. And Waterloo understood very early that it could not rely on a single economic driver, mainly manufacturing. And so they invested in the University of Waterloo, and they made it the top engineering university in the world. It still is. And from that, offshoots of computer science, actuarial sciences, among other things. And many of you in this room know how this story ends. 50 years later, this Waterloo-Toronto technology hub is the third largest technology cluster in North America. And that took a long time, but when I was growing up, I saw the immediate ripple effects. The high schools around the university started focusing on science, technology. Even I was computer coding in grade school before computers were even a thing. And really, that made everything better. But something even my colleagues at Doctors don't know is that in 1990, my life changed. There was an economic downturn, mass manufacturing layoffs. My parents lost their jobs. There was a mortgage kind of dramatic increase in rates. We lost our home, and I was effectively homeless for the last 5 years of my high school, since my entire high school career, in and out of homeless shelters, struggling to eat. It was a very, very, very tough time. But interestingly, when I went to school, I felt enriched, because the culture in Waterloo is that this was not the end. You were going to university, like it or not. And that's what I did. And long story short, I ended up going to university. I was a varsity wrestler. I graduated with the academic gold medalist, completed medical school, completed a neurology fellowship in Vancouver, post-fellowship training in UCLA, Harvard Medical School, IHI. I have a master's degree in dementia. And before I joined Doctors Hospital, I helped transform one of the poorest performing stroke centers in Canada to one of the best, in over 400% increase in every stroke metric for that center. So I'll tell you, what I know and what I'm going to convince you today is that our brain is our most important asset. Our brain is the primary driver of innovation, resilience, adaptability, and I tell you, I'm here because if not for the grace of God in my brain, and that is the truth. But sadly, my story is not unique. You guys know our brains, individually and collectively, is under threat. There are micro threats, things such as food insecurity that you heard about today, inadequate access to health care, trauma, poor sleep, low quality education. There are mid-level threats, and there are macro threats, things like climate change, aging population, ineffective governance, even living in the digital age is a threat to our brain, all attacking our brain, and guess what? Our brains are losing this battle. And if indeed the brains make the world go round, we are in trouble. We live in a brain-negative economy, an economy that devalues and deprioritizes brain health, and the cost is staggering. 14% of the global burden of health is attributed to brain disorders. If you or your loved one has a sick brain, guess what? Your life is cut down by 20 years. And now, the average age of the diagnosis of a brain disorder is before the age of 25. And we're in an economic forum, guess what? It gets worse, to the tune of $2.1 trillion lost annually. That's US dollars. To give you a perspective, that is 2/3 the GDP of India as a result of this brain-negative economy, as the result of brain disorders. Now, obviously, the relationship between the economy and the brain is complicated. This is a very interesting study from the UK Biobank Group, and they've taken a representative sample of 40,000 brains, and they're actually studying these brains in terms of structure and function over about 30 years. And they asked an interesting question. What is the relationship between our brain health and fluctuations in the stock market? And obviously, not all 40,000 participants are heavily invested in the stock market. But as you know, the stock market index is a global measure of geopolitical and socioeconomic stability. And they focused on an area of the brain called the amygdala. And these are two almond-shaped structures deep in our brain called the limbic system. It is our primitive brain. It is our fire alarm. When we're under threat, the amygdala increases activation and the volume increases. Then when we remove this threat, sometimes the amygdala volume may regress. And what they found was remarkable. When they looked at the FTSE 100 index, look at what happens. As the stock market index declines, we are under threat. Our brain amygdala senses that threat and actually increases in volume. And then what do we see? As the index goes up, we remove that threat and our amygdala volume decreases. Macroeconomic fluctuations have a real and substantial impact on the very structure of our brain. And this has been replicated in almost every stock market index except China because it's not a real stock market. So given this increasing understanding of the relationship between brain and the economy, in 2021, thought leaders came up with this novel framework called brain capital. And in simplest terms, brain capital is the economic output as a result of brain health. And there's two main drivers. Remember, you learned that healthy brain is the foundation. With a sick brain, your economic potential is severely limited. And the second driver, coupled to that, is brain skills. The same things we value and use every day. Innovation, lateral thinking, communication, social and emotional resilience, and regulation. And those two drivers feed together to create a productive and complex capital stock that accumulates over the course of a lifetime. And now there is emerging evidence that's quite robust that brain capital is just as important as any key indicator of national prosperity and security, including GDP, including energy independence, including traffic infrastructure. And so my critical ask of you guys today is you guys take the lead. that we begin to account for and to build on brain capital. And to do this, we need to destroy silos. We need to converge experts in policy, government, neuroscience, economics, environment, education, all working to do one thing: to measure, monitor, and to prioritize brain capital. And it's quite intentional that I started with data that we measure, because if we cannot see it, we cannot treat it. And that is a problem here on the island. This is the Global Brain Capital Index. I'm not making this up. This was established and maintained by the European Mediterranean Economic Association. Almost every nation is indexed here except guess who? The Cayman Islands. And it's not because we're small. Believe me, Bermuda and Bahamas are on here. So this needs to be remedied, and remedied quickly. So one of the action points I would like to see happen is we start a national brain capital dashboard. We may borrow these same drivers from that global dashboard, but obviously we can adapt it to our own national needs. And the second ask is that we operationalize brain capital. We make it into an index. Looking at those inputs, remember those two drivers, brain capital and brain skills, but remember, brain capital is an economic construct. We're going to look at return of investments, things like IP generation, increased government revenue, the formation of new high-paying, high-skilled jobs. What I'm asking you guys to do is to stop thinking in terms of quarters and start thinking in terms of generations. We need to stop focusing on problems and even solutions and focus on the solution generator. The protection and promotion of brain health is the critical problem and challenge of the 21st century. I'm asking you guys to take the lead, to begin to account for and to build a brain capital on the island so that we may form a future without limits, and a future that we can face any challenge that is thrown at us. And that's it. Time's up. Thank you very much.